Wait, there we
afternoon.
go. Good morning. It is
And good
afternoon
afternoon.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't tell where I am because I'm back in California, but I still think I'm on Central Time. Welcome to the Friday
That's right.
Grief Chat. I'm Jill.
I'm Deb, and I am talking to you lovingly from my car at a Amoco gas station in I don't know what town, but it has signal. And that's why I stopped. I'm on my way home. Jill and I have both been in La Crosse. And traditionally, on my way home from La Crosse, uh, I stop at my brother's for 2 nurturing days. And I got a lot of rhubarb. Yay. I
Yep.
had great food, lots of asparagus because he has a big patch. And we ate a lot of asparagus and onions. He planted 294 sets of onions.
Oh my God.
I know. And anyway, I didn't see the cows, Jill, but you might have seen some pictures of goats. I did get a lot of goats, and you know, it was just it's just nurturing to wake up in the middle of nature. I mean, no
Oh,
streets around, none.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an
So
amazing experience. And I am so glad you got to do that.
I did. I hadn't seen him in a while, and then we're going to go the day after Father's Day and see his wife. I miss my sister-in-law, Lisa, very much, and then I'm going to see all three kids. They're not kids, young. They're adults. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm going to see all them, and I just want to say I'm so glad you're back home, and to our listening audience, we had a great time.
Oh, we
and
so did.
and uh, look for an announcement down the road. We're not supposed to say anything, but I think Jill and I got paid a
Huge compliment.
huge compliment, and so we were at the International Death Grief and Bereavement Workshop in um, in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and we presented, and it was about generations and about generational healing and cultural shared grieving. And the name of our talk was Walt Got It Right: What Generations of Disney Movies and a few others taught us about loss, death, and grief. And for me, and I'm pretty sure for Jill, we have this knack of, in one sentence, we could sort of trigger your crying and trigger your laughing. Is that correct? Is that
That is correct. And we went from clips that made people, it just caught all of the emotion of how they learned to do grief as children
right?
and as adults, and movies and music that connected to losses they'd had throughout their lives, to closing that out with some laughter and with some reframing and some clinical response to what was included in the clip, and really seeing the genius and the magic of Disney while also still touching their hearts. We could make them
And
laugh. We brought tears. We brought connection to everyone, which is what that conference is about.
it is. And I wrote a dear friend of mine to describe the conference. And this conference, like at times, and these are with all the speakers, I sort of was, I had sorrow and rage for the mass murders that happened in my 69-year lifetime that I did not know.
We had
I
an absolutely powerful presentation from a social
Right,
worker who actually consults with museums that have to do with mass losses, and she brought slides from her time that she spent um, in the mass murders that occurred in, I'm saying the wrong, thinking the wrong country, in
I will tell you in just a second.
Africa, and it was so powerful, and the pictures of the church that had been targeted with grenades so that everyone inside the church could be taken down, and how the people there lovingly cared for the family members who had died by cleaning what was left and putting them on display either in caskets or just the bones neatly lined up, because they needed to witness the loss but also do the after death care that so many people need to do. It's something we do here in our nice neat deaths at home with hospice. Which
That's
country did?
it's so Kilgali Genocide Memorial, and there also was a
Uganda.
Johannesburg.
It was Uganda, wasn't it?
It was Uganda, yes, yeah,
Yes. And it was
and
horrible, and so many thousands died. And the world,
fifty
and one of the
thousand in
things that
a
was,
church.
and what was said
50.
was this was witnessed live, and nobody stopped it. And that's part of our current history is all the damage being done to people and nobody stopping it. It was it, it was powerful, and that we were charged to go out and do something and do better.
You know, um, a little side note to that: Clinton went there and apologized because he knew he didn't do enough. And
Yep.
Jill, have you ever been to the Oklahoma Bombing Museum and Memorial?
I have not. My parents did, and they shared their pictures of it.
I went, and that's when I saw that memorial in Oklahoma. I remember I came up with this phrase: the United States is great at memorials, but horrible at stopping what causes them.
Absolutely.
And both uh, the Oklahoma bombing and 9/11, just for two, 9/11 one in New York,
All the synagogues, all of it.
and the Holocaust Museum, there's volunteers that were poignantly touched either by, let's say, the Holocaust Museum. They too are survivors, and they go there to honor the people around them that died. And 9/11, people will go and volunteer because their loved ones died at
Hmm.
the Twin Towers
Right.
or at the Pentagon or on the airplane.
Yeah.
So
We
that
were going to go to Oklahoma City, but they had just passed a law that said that gay and lesbian families could have their children removed, even if they traveled through the state, to be placed with heterosexual families. So we detoured that vacation trip and did something different. So, but we did take our kids to the Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C. Because if you don't share
likewise.
history, you repeat it.
And right now, our country, many of the administration is taking away, and I'm going to mention his name, uh, taking away all the names and events that have happened over centuries here in this country. Harvey Milk, they took his
Mm-hmm.
name off a cruise ship, not cruise ship, off a Navy ship,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. So, oh, the 50,000 people that were at the church was the Namada Genocide Memorial.
Yeah.
That's what it was, Namada. Um, Jill, what was your one of the best for you uh, conference breakout sessions or keynotes? Do you remember?
There were two, all the keynotes were favorites. We had Alison Penny from Child Bereavement UK, and I am a total fangirl. And if anyone here is listening and needs resources for children who are grieving and their families, go to Childhood Bereavement UK. They actually do have a royal warrant because they have princes who, as very young children, lost their mom. But they have
Hmm.
amazing materials that are completely available for download around the world. So we had her talking about all the things that they're struggling with there because of budget, but to try and build out greater bereavement leave time. 2 weeks, not 3 days. They have it for parent loss of a child now, unpaid. They're trying to make it 2 weeks for all major family losses because you can't do grief in 3 days. We know that. That's our talk too. And we had Ken Doka, who is one of the thought leaders in grief. If you need to look up grief, Ken Doka's name will come up. That's where I had my first training back in the 80s in how to do grief support groups. And he talked about grief through all of the generations and the way each generation has adapted to looking at grief and looking at loss. And he identified the boomer generation by leading us in the Mickey Mouse song, which I will never forget. And we closed
Yep,
out our session with the Mickey Mouse, you know, MIC, right? We did that together.
we
And
did
then
that together.
Tasha Border, she is an amazing speaker. She's not well known except in like the grief community and the intellectual university community. She is a PhD. She's an amazing, courageous Black woman. She was speaking about generational trauma and grief, but she also came very clear about the fact that she'd witnessed a horrific accident on her way into town the day
Hmm.
before and bore witness to what had occurred and how it impacted her. And that is what I love about this conference is we can talk about things in real life, relate it to the research, relate it to the work we do, but it's personal and there was support. And everybody there supported her in that trauma,
And she
right?
didn't leave with it. She
Right.
got to that
It's
at the
not.
end. She knew she was done speaking about, and the her program title was Intergenerational Transmission of Loss by White Supremacy and Black Cultural Resistance.
And it was
And
amazing
she,
and
it was
powerful.
amazing. Yes, yes.
And then someone I dearly adore, Jacob van Wielik, was there from Holland, the Netherlands, I suppose I should call it. Um, and he does a lot of work with corporations. And he also lost his mom close to when I lost my mom. So we were sort of on that same journey, but differently. And he talked about how that impacted the work that he does and how he frames the work that he does in terms of allowing space for grief in companies and also how he's unapologetically Catholic, doesn't need to make it that, but he uses that as his support network, his support system. And I think that's important to acknowledge. We each have our social networks. That's his strongest one, that and his crew at home in the Netherlands. So I don't think I didn't actually have a favorite this year. I had an everybody, and there were those that I
Yeah.
missed because we were
Oh,
speaking or there were other
I
ones to go
know.
to.
I know.
There
You
weren't
know,
enough.
I really wanted to see, but it was at the same time as ours, is Ariel Friedenser. She is a grandchild of a Holocaust survivor, and hers was Holocaust Survivors Who Made Me. And especially in this time of a surge of outward anti Semitic hate, you just need these things to remind you that you are not the only one.
Right.
Um,
What about you?
I
What are your other favorites?
well, I I really like the grief resulting from infancy and pregnancy loss, a multi generational perspective. And I'm you you know how they say you never know what another person is going through behind what you assume is they're just being mean to you. And without giving a whole bunch of their story, the bottom line was she found out 10 years later after her own, uh, the speakers uh, had a stillbirth, and how she handled the stillbirth and honored the name. She honored that child at Christmas time. She she waited. She sat with her grief when the baby had was born still, born dead. And 10 years later, she found out something from her mother-in-law that just, I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the room.
And
So that
explained
was
all the
very,
generational trauma of it.
yes. And how
Mhm.
things, and it made me think about my grandmother, my great grandmother. It made me think on both sides. And
Mhm.
what made my mom who she was
Right.
and why. And growing up Jewish, and I often say this, and other Jewish people have heard this. I didn't know people had baby showers. What's a baby shower? It was constantly told to me, you can't celebrate the baby growing until the baby's born.
Right.
You cannot, because something could happen to the baby.
Right. Right. And
And
mhm.
go ahead.
I remember when I was in the car on the way to the cemetery with my grandmother the day we buried my grandfather. We just had the service on the way to the cemetery. And for some reason, she chose that moment to say, I just love how much support women who have miscarriages and stillbirths have these days. Because when I had mine, count them between 4 and 6, we just had to go back to work. I was a nurse. There was no baby. I needed to go back to work. There was no sympathy from your husband because that was just expected to be part of a woman's experience, and you just let it go. And she never got super close to any of her kids. So we had that generational trauma. And when my mom had a stillbirth, she named her, but she didn't get to see her. And she didn't talk about her until very close to the end of her life.
Yep.
It's a continuous experience for
Right.
many women.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so glad she brought that to the conference.
She did. And it was, and you see, even as I'm talking, everything's at my heart. It's at this particular conference, you are seen, you are heard, and you feel seen and you feel heard.
And
And that's
supported.
probably why, and supported. And it doesn't matter uh, what's going on, you just say it and people are there.
Right.
I remember my Aunt Sandy was died at this conference.
Yes, she
That's
did.
2 years ago. That's three Junes ago. And I just had to say to Dan, who makes beautiful jewelry, by the way, he was a hospital chaplain, and he also runs the memorial along with Pete. What's Pete's last name?
We have a
Yeah,
memorial at the close of conference, and there's a
right,
memorial quilt, and you can write names of people that you want to be heard, and they read them
right.
in a very solemn ceremony each year.
And this year, they decided instead of putting things up on a screen like uh, and that takes a lot of work. They would just read poetry, beautiful, um, what someone might say, grief poetry.
Grief poetry, mourning
And
poetry. Hmm.
yes, yes, and it was just incredible. It really was. And then let's see what else. So I also really like this one. Her name is Amy, and she took us through an activity of weaving grief. And it was very simple. I'm going to do it in one of my bereavement classes. And she had a card and lots of different colored yarn. And this yarn was for this grief. You labeled what was for what grief. And you decided how to weave it together. Quite often, one of the things that um, particularly people who have been in the grief industry for a while, right? I'm going to call it the death and grief industry. You don't use the word closure.
No.
People get their hackles up when you
Or
use the word
acceptance.
or acceptance, closure, and there's a couple other words. Oh, and Kubler-Ross and the 5 stages of grief. Let me explain once again to our listening audience why. When Kubler-Ross wrote those 5 stages of grief, it was for the person who was dying, not the people that are going to be left behind.
To help the
And
people being left behind understand what they were experiencing with them.
the dying person was
Right.
experiencing. Over the years, it's been translated and easily misunderstood that those are the experiences of the people left behind, as if you are supposed to complete each stage. And and you're not supposed to have closure, but you do have integration, and the waves of hurt, they will stay with you depending on the type of loss you just had. I'm not in charge of how long, but the intensity of that hurt gets
Diminishes.
less and diminishes. With
Hmm.
the understanding something can come along and you'll be right back there 15 years ago when your daughter died or your dad died,
Or your
whatever it
dog
is,
dies.
or your
Hmm.
dog died, yes. And so Amy took us through a physical way of integration, weaving our losses together to make something beautiful.
Hmm.
And it was I, it was a busy class, so I really liked that. Another, uh, well, I just loved Kendoka. I finally could say, yes, I am a boomer. I have no respect for authority titles, none, zero. You know, I do have respect for people. So
Hmm.
that I like to be affirmed. I'm not always feeling secure. I do want to talk about our presentation
I'm hoping,
one more
yeah,
time.
because it was a powerful one.
It was, and uh, a few different things Jill and I did. Jill made the decision to not, except for the Lion King, not show Old Yeller when Old Yeller dies. Jill made the decision to not show Bambi and hear the shot. Jill made the decision, and I supported that when she said, we can't traumatize these people. That is
No,
a trauma because they will remember their mother, father, sister, brother getting murdered. They
right.
will remember the traumatic part, and I'm like, this is why I
And we
love
didn't
working with the therapist.
and we didn't show Mrs.
And
Jumbo being attacked by the trainers with the whips. It was just too traumatic. The continuing bonds were what we talked about, but not the, we didn't need to show the trauma to anyone.
Right. And I love, and we said that to our audience.
Hmm.
When Jill and I speak, we usually talk about our thought process because that gets them thinking about their thought process.
Right.
So that's number one. The other thing, I Jill and I, compared to other people, we have been doing this show. This is our anniversary month, Jill.
It is
So
5 years.
5 years. And so we have a way of working and intuitively coming in. And so I'm just giving this compliment to Jill and I because we've done it so long. And we have that intuition when to speak, when not to speak. And thirdly, we had so many different types of grief besides the generations of Disney movies
Oh God.
that people could identify. The best thing, I really loved how Jill said this way, and then I said this part. Jill said, here you are, you're watching a Disney movie. Wouldn't it be great if grief was like that? You get 90 minutes to 2 hours, except for some movies that decide to go 2.5 hours. And, you know, you get attached, you get really close to, they take that person out or that doll or that cartoon character or whatever, they're gone. The grieving begins with either the family or grandmother or whatever, and then you're done. It's like, that's really nice. It all gets tied up in a package, but does it? It just allows you time to identify and get your grief out. I brought in another part that says, and for those of you who eat for comfort, here's another. You eat the popcorn, you drink the sweet, you have your sweet and your salty. So you're allowed to comfort yourself while watching all this grief. Just fascinating. And Jill, we have some few more minutes. Could you tell them the Disney story that you read?
I
Oh,
certainly
Steve.
will. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate that. And Harrell, I can't believe it's been 4 years since that morning.
Wow.
Stacy and I went to the house that day and sat with him while things occurred. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, so the Disney story as to why Disney includes grief in their work, in his movies, is that he had just come into really being successful after a lot of struggle. Disney was not an automatic winner. He worked hard, and it wasn't for many years that he became successful. But when he did, he bought his mom, he built his mom a custom house, not a big one, right? It was 1940. We had war coming just after the depression. But it was a house just for his mom, right? She'd never had her own home. And then within a year, there was a carbon monoxide leak, and she died in that house. And after that, every Disney movie included the death of a mom or a parent figure for many years, and it was sacrosanct. That was never removed from a plot line. It was not to be joked about inside the cut rooms where they were editing. He made it clear to the editors, and that continued after his death as well. Now, he does have movies now that don't have deaths of parents, but his need to process loss became part of the Disney process, which is why all of us learned over the years how to process loss with our Disney characters. It was a little more abrupt in terms of Dumbo and how harsh that scene was, and Bambi with how harsh that scene was. But it still is loss. Toy Story 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And which has become an industry with parents taking pictures of their kids going out the door to first day of school with all the Toy Story characters in the background watching them leave. It comes from the scene about adolescence from, was that Up? Right? It's all of those things. It's all the losses in our lives integrated into Disney movies. And as Deb says, and then they're wrapped up in an hour and a half, and you've had your popcorn and your sweet soda, and you're all jazzed up, and you can then go and rejoin life, which is integration and continuing bonds. It's all the things related to grief, and it's all
It
courtesy of
is.
Disney.
And I don't think our audience has considered all the different types of losses
Right.
and all the, we didn't show that many clips because, we only have so much time. But we talked about the different movies and how, what generation, I think it was Gen X, when they started uh, putting more cultural movies out there
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, Disney knows how to market. And so just look at what are the trends for that generation. I found that fascinating. And and we did not, excuse the term, whitewash Pocahontas. It
No.
wasn't as, it's like when I was little and they taught us about pilgrims and the Indians were always best friends and stuff. We know that to not be true. We know that. And so, but they tried. So they get courtesy points for trying. And then they did better. And we both learned that they had done a lot of Coco, but then for Day of the Dead, because that's what that one is, and celebrating that particular culture, someone came in and said, "This isn't right. This is not the culture. This isn't right." And they went in and changed it.
They redid. They
And
did a major rewrite and they reshot. Mm-hmm.
yes, yeah, and
Mhm.
that gets my respect. I
That's Disney
respect
all the way through. Mhm.
people's integrity. So, with
So
that, Jill,
we're at the half hour plus. Thank you for being here. If you're listening on the podcast, please go and watch us as well on Facebook on Humor, Grace, and Grief. You can find us at facebook.com/ Friday Grief Chat. And I know it doesn't make sense, but that's how it is. It's Friday Grief Chat on Facebook on the page Humor, Grace, and Grief. And we are Humor, Grace, and Grief on all the podcast platforms. Thank you for being here. We'll be back next week. We have a whole slew of people who are going to become and be guests. We recruited
yes,
heavily while we were at the conference. We have others that we've been working with and before now. So we're going to have a continuous panel of guests coming on very soon, and we're looking forward to that. Thank you for being here.
thanks everyone. We'll see you next week.
We will.
Okay.